Hello everyone. Tonight we're going to head somewhere colder than your fridge, stranger than your dreams, and older than history remembers. You're about to stand beneath a moonless sky at the bottom of the world, Antarctica, where something buried under ice for thousands of years is whispering your name. Not metaphorically, literally. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Now pull up your blanket and don't mind the hum. That's just the mystery warming up. You've been messing around with a half-frozen radio on your third day in the Ross Ice Shelf outpost. That's what they called it anyway, Outpost Helion. Just you, a diesel generator, a satellite uplink, and some half-working snowmobiles that hated starting in the cold. You weren't a scientist. Not officially. You were there to catalog glacial drift data and, when time allowed, scan radio frequencies for magnetic interference. What you got instead was a message. It came in at 3:46 a.m. Shortwave burst. 3 pulses. Pause. Then 5. Then 13. At first you thought it was just aurora noise, those weird ionospheric hiccups that happen when the solar wind slaps Earth's atmosphere. But this wasn't random. It repeated exactly every 17 minutes. And it wasn't just static. It had structure, felt intentional. You recorded it, ran it through your old signal decompiler, and tried not to yawn. Maybe it was some weird Russian thing bouncing off the ionosphere. But you couldn't stop staring at the pattern. Then came the blip on the satellite readout. You weren't even looking for anomalies that night. You were just pinging topographic radar scans from an outdated database that hadn't been used since the 90s. Just a little what-if exploration. And there it was, triangular, rising in 3 perfect points, sharp enough to defy the smoothness of the surrounding ice sheet, buried 2.3 miles under. That's when your stomach flipped. This wasn't just some glacial compression pattern or natural ridgeline. This was deliberate. It matched exactly the spatial ratios of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Not in shape, in orientation. 3 points, aligned with Orion's belt, just like the pyramids, just like other sacred structures across the globe. Only, no one built cities in Antarctica, right? Odd fact of the night? In 1513, the Piri Reis map, drawn by an Ottoman admiral using older sources, depicted parts of the Antarctic coastline without ice, thousands of years before it was supposedly discovered. Scientists still debate whether the map is a lucky guess, a hoax, or a relic copied from ancient seafaring civilizations. You didn't want to admit it. But that night, looking at the alignment, you whispered, what if there really was something down there? You emailed the coordinates to Tuma, your friend from an earlier assignment in Greenland, the one who always believed pyramids were more than tombs. He replied instantly. One word, go. Of course, you didn't exactly have clearance. And technically, venturing beyond the perimeter required 2 personnel minimum. But you weren't thinking clearly. You were thinking myth. You were thinking truth wrapped in ice and forgotten by time. You strapped on your snow gear, tied your signal repeater to your belt, and left a note. If I'm not back by sunrise, follow the signal. You didn't expect to get far. But then the snowmobile started on the first try. That never happened. You chalked it up to adrenaline. You didn't question it. The sky above was pulsing green and violet, the aurora curling across the atmosphere like a breath from another dimension. No wind, no sound, just the endless white crunch beneath your boots when you stopped to check your bearings. Then your scanner blinked. You were on top of the anomaly, except you saw nothing, just flat snow. But the scanner disagreed. You pulled out your ice probe and dropped it through a melt channel. The metal rod fell further than it should have. Then a hollow clink. You leaned over and whispered, there's something down there. And for a moment, it felt like something whispered back. You laughed, nervously. Then the signal repeated on your receiver. March 5th, 13. You looked down at your GPS. The triangle now had edges, which made no sense. It was just ice. You tapped the snow with your boot again. This time it cracked. A sharp fracture zipped across the white, then curved back toward you like a spiderweb pulling tight. You stepped back, and the snow sank. Not caved, not collapsed. sank, smoothly, quietly, like an elevator descending into shadow. Beneath it, black stone, polished, unfrozen, and carved with symbols that didn't belong anywhere on this continent. You stared into the opening beneath your boots, heart hammering so hard it muffled the wind that wasn't blowing. The ice hadn't cracked. It had receded, drawn back from the stone like it was embarrassed to cover something so old. You dropped to your knees, brushing frost with your glove, revealing a curved black surface. Smooth, not chipped, not cracked, not weathered by time or trapped beneath pressure like everything else down here. It looked recent. You pulled out your thermal scanner. -27 Celsius. And yet, no frost clung to the surface. No condensation formed when you breathed on it. Your hand, almost on autopilot, reached for the edge of the hole. You didn't plan to go in. Not at first. You just wanted to look. Peer into the crack and snap a photo, maybe tag it for a return expedition. Do the responsible thing. Do the safe thing. Instead, the edge gave way under your palm, crumbling like ash, and you fell. Not far. Maybe 6 feet. Maybe 7. You landed hard enough to knock the wind out of you but soft enough to realize something had caught your fall. Not a cushion. A slope. A gradual slide beneath the ice, carved in angles your flashlight didn't want to obey. You stood slowly, dusted your gloves, turned on your headlamp. What it revealed didn't belong under any known glacier. The chamber was huge. The ceiling rose high into darkness, vanishing beyond the reach of your light. Walls curved gently inward like the inside of a hollowed pyramid. Symbols etched into black stone wrapped around the walls. Some geometric, some like runes, some disturbingly like constellations. One spiral, in particular, pulsed faintly when your light touched it. And directly across from where you stood, a staircase, descending into the dark. Odd fact of the night, in 2016, a team of researchers scanning beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza discovered what they called a void. It was the size of a passenger plane and completely inaccessible. Scientists still debate whether it's an ancient engineering trick, a lost burial chamber, or something we're not meant to open. You walked forward, slowly, boots crunching on frost, echoing faintly like walking through a half-dream. Your comm crackled. Tuma? It was static at first. Then the faint edge of a voice. Don't move too far. It's not just. Then silence. But it was enough. Enough to remind you someone out there knew where you were. Enough to keep you going. The stairs were worn, but not from erosion. From footsteps. So many that the center of each step dipped downward. Like the stone had softened and remembered every traveler. Each one marked by 3 lines. You counted them as you walked. 1, 2, 3. Pause. Then again. 3 lines, 3 beats, like the signal. Like the code. You whispered, "What does it mean?" And the walls responded. Not in words, but with shifting glimmers of reflected light. One surface began to glow faintly, illuminating a mural. 3 pyramids. 3 moons above them. A spiral beneath, but not sand. You gasped. This wasn't a forgotten city. This was a mirror, a memory. You reached the bottom step and stepped into another chamber, this one smaller, warmer, lit from below by something glowing under translucent crystal panels in the floor. And in the center of the room, pedestal, holding a disc.
No dust, no frost.
Just a clean, ivory-like surface covered in spirals. You didn't need to be told. This was the key. But the key to what? You stepped forward, heart thudding. The disc pulsed gently under your hand as you reached toward it. Not bright, just enough to notice. You touched it and felt heat race up your arm. A memory, but not yours. A village by moonlight. Not Arctic. Desert. The sound of drums. A pyramid under construction, not with ropes and pulleys, but with hums and cymbals and vibration. You saw people chanting, eyes closed, arms raised. A city not ruled. Harmonized. Then ice. Everything froze. Not in weather. In time. You gasped and pulled your hand back. The image vanished. You looked up and the mural had changed. Now it showed the same village. But empty. The pyramids stood, but the people were gone. Only the spirals remained. Odd fact of the night? There are legends from the Dogon tribe of Mali that claim their ancestors came from a star invisible to the naked eye, Sirius B, long before telescopes could detect it. Scientists still debate whether this knowledge was passed by early contact with astronomers, or something older. You stepped back. The pedestal sank into the floor, and a doorway opened behind it. Cold wind rushed in. Not air. Memory. You stepped forward, teeth clenched, every hair on your arms standing. Whatever was next, whatever had waited this long to be seen, wasn't going to stay buried much longer. The doorway breathed. No other word fit. As you stepped forward, the frame of the passage inhaled. Not with sound, but with motion. The walls pulled back slightly, organic and impossibly smooth, as if the ice itself had decided you were worthy of entry. Your boots passed over the threshold and into a tunnel dimly lit with embedded veins of light. Not carved, but grown, like roots frozen mid-bloom. Your breath fogged before your face, but the air no longer bit at your skin. It was cool, not deadly. Preserved. Inside, it smelled faintly of salt. The tunnel curved downward in a spiral, of course, and as you descended, the wall carvings changed. They stopped resembling hieroglyphs or constellations and instead morphed into something else. Tiny ridges like waveforms. Frequencies. Sound made solid. You brushed your glove across them, and a faint vibration danced along your fingertips. A hum. Low and ancient. The same one you'd heard before, but now closer, more distinct. The spiral narrowed, then opened into a domed chamber. Vast and oval. The walls covered with panels of shimmering ice that reflected light from an unseen source. You stepped inside and stopped short. Before you floated a model. No wires. No suspensions. Just a holographic-like projection of a solar system, no, not ours. A distant cluster of stars, each orb pulsing faintly in synchronized rhythm. Around one of them, a single planet, glowing pale blue, with a spiral formation etched into its surface. You whispered, "That's not Earth." A voice answered behind you,
No.
"But it remembers Earth." You turned fast, but no one was there. The voice had been low, clear, human even, but it carried weight like glacier movement, slow, undeniable. The model rotated slowly. As you watched, it zoomed in on the spiral formation. Not just a shape, a structure, built into the crust of the distant world. Pyramid, covered in frost. Your heart skipped. "That's not possible," you murmured. But here's your odd fact of the day. In 2015, NASA's Kepler mission identified a star, KIC 8462852, that dimmed irregularly, not like a planet transit. More like something massive was partially blocking its light. Some hypothesized a field of comets. Others, more boldly, suggested a megastructure. Scientists still debate whether what they saw was a data glitch or a sign of engineering on a cosmic scale. You stepped closer to the hologram. As your shadow passed over the image, it shifted again. Now the pyramid was gone. In its place, a city beneath ice, not built by hand, not assembled stone by stone, but grown. Vast arches of white mineral curved like antlers, like coral. Buildings pulsed with light like bioluminescent creatures. And in the center, a spiral tower rose into the frozen sky. You didn't recognize the architecture, but it felt familiar. "Memory," the voice said again. This time closer. You turned again. Still no one. But this time you understood. It wasn't someone speaking. It was the place itself. The room was remembering aloud. You backed toward the wall, trying to absorb everything, when the floor beneath you shimmered, then opened. Not a drop. Not a collapse. A choice. You floated gently downward as the room receded, your boots no longer touching anything solid. Your body descended through rings of light, each humming in a slightly different pitch. You felt your heartbeat sync with them, then accelerate. Below you, a garden. Frozen but alive. trees of crystal and branches like bones, petals of translucent ice, each curved into a soft spiral. Small creatures moved between the growth, too fast to catch with your eyes, but you sensed them, like shadows of extinct animals, passing through you as though you were made of fog. You touched down softly. Your boots crunched frost-covered moss, and before you stood another figure, this time not imagined, not hidden, an elder, not Nuviak, not human, and yet wearing her shawl. You opened your mouth. She raised one hand, not in warning but in welcome. She did not speak. She didn't need to. Instead, she reached into the folds of her robe and produced something smooth and white. Another disc. But this one was different. It shimmered from within, glowed blue like the stars outside the tunnel. And when she placed it in your palm, you remembered. Not the way you remembered childhood or math class or the time you skinned your knee on a rock. You remembered being someone else, walking the frozen arches of that alien city, studying the stars not from Earth but from above it, marking the spirals in ivory and bone not to warn others, but to find your way back. You collapsed to your knees. Tears froze instantly on your lashes. The figure, now not so strange, stepped forward and touched your shoulder. You looked up and asked, "Why did I forget?" She said nothing, but in your mind you heard, "To learn again." The spiral on the disc pulsed, and from the garden rose a second hologram, not of a city or a star, but of you, standing at the pyramid's base, hand on the stone, a spiral spinning behind your head like a halo. You weren't the first. You weren't even the 100th. You were one of many, sent back. To remember. Scientists still debate whether ancient structures like pyramids were built purely for ceremonial or astronomical purposes, or whether they served another, unknown function, perhaps one aligned with frequencies or resonance we still don't fully understand. You stepped forward. The garden shimmered, and above you, the stars aligned into a perfect spiral. You didn't speak. You didn't need to. You were ready. You were still kneeling in the garden of frost when the stars overhead began to change shape. At first, it was subtle, a faint shifting in the constellation spiral, like the tightening of a knot you hadn't realized was loose. But as your gaze lifted, you saw that the stars weren't moving. You were. The garden, the frozen arches, even the air, it all began to rotate gently, as if you'd become the still point in a turning wheel. And then it stopped. You were standing once more, the glowing disc warm in your palm. The robed figure had disappeared into the frozen orchard, vanishing without sound. The trees no longer shimmered, but they leaned toward where she had walked, as if even in silence they were listening. A soft chime echoed across the chamber. You turned. The garden had opened behind you. A path, narrow and lined with etched stones, now led downward into a canyon of ice lit from within. Not with torches or lanterns, with memory. Each stone along the path glowed faintly, displaying fragments of scenes that flickered in and out of view. A group of robed figures tracing spirals into ivory. A child humming a lullaby beside a pool of black water. A moonlit mountain where something large, something not of this world, slept beneath a snowy cap. These weren't dreams. These were your pasts. You felt them pulling at the edges of your thoughts. Not as stories you'd read, but as things you'd done. You reached out to touch one of the glowing stones, and as your fingers neared its surface, a flicker of heat kissed your skin. You withdrew quickly, not because it burned, but because the vision it gave was too vivid. You stood in a circle of light, much like this one, facing a being made of shifting geometry, triangles and spirals, all in motion, all impossible. And you said, "I will go." The memory vanished. You blinked, heart racing. I said yes. You murmured. Behind you, the disc pulsed once. Of course you had. Here's your odd fact of the night. A phenomenon called cryptomnesia occurs when a person believes they've had an original thought, but it's actually a memory resurfacing without their awareness. Scientists still debate whether these are mental glitches or deeper patterns of cognition we don't fully understand. The canyon narrowed until you were crawling, hands brushing cold stone, knees sore against ancient ridges carved long before humans mapped Antarctica. And then, without warning, you dropped. Not far, just enough to lose your breath. And when you rose, you were in a new chamber. But this one was not ice. This one was stone. Warmed by some inner fire, the walls were dark and smooth, with markings unlike any you'd seen above. Here, the spirals turned into lines. Then back again. A cycle. And in the center of the chamber, a well. You approached slowly. The air above it shimmered like heat haze. You leaned over the edge. There was no water, just a surface like obsidian. Polished, reflective. And yet it didn't reflect you. It showed another you, standing in the same spot, but older, worn, eyes different, not tired but wide, like someone who had seen too much and still chose to return. And then the reflection moved, raised its hand, spoke. You heard no words, but your mind filled with a single phrase. The spiral is not a shape, it is a choice. You gasped, stumbled back. The image vanished. Tuma's voice called from somewhere above. Are you all right? You shouted back, I found something. And then, without thinking, you placed the glowing disc into the center of the well. The obsidian shifted, turned, and clicked. The wall ahead cracked. Not violently, not with sound. Parted like curtains, revealing the oldest chamber yet. A space carved not for storage, not for memory, but for returning. You stepped inside. The air changed. No longer cold. No longer anything you could describe. Pressed against your skin like velvet fog. The light in here didn't come from any single point. It radiated from the walls themselves, pulsing like breath. At the far end, a massive wall etched with 15 concentric spirals. Each one glowed with a soft blue hue. You approached. As you neared, one of the spirals darkened. Only one. You reached toward it. Your fingers touched the stone, and your thoughts became sound. Your memory unraveled into the room. You felt it leave you gently, each moment, each image, each whispered truth, flowing into the spiral like mist drawn toward a current. You backed away, breathless, and the stone glowed brighter. You had given it a piece of yourself, and the chamber accepted it. Behind you, the wall sealed again. The well closed. The disc was gone. But you were not empty. You were lighter. Tuma found you minutes later, flashlight shaking in his hand. He looked at your face and stopped cold. You saw it, he said. You nodded. There's more, he whispered. You both turned back toward the path that had brought you here, but it was gone. In its place, a new passage carved in real time as though the mountain was reshaping itself just for you. Scientists still debate whether Antarctica's interior holds ancient ruins, buried beneath millions of years of ice. Satellite imagery has shown unnatural formations, but there's no proof. At least, not yet. You and Tuma stepped forward, into the new tunnel, and behind you the spiral on the wall dimmed. Satisfied, for now. The tunnel wasn't stone. It wasn't ice either. It was something in between, something alive in the quietest possible way. Your boots didn't echo anymore. They whispered, like the surface beneath you absorbed sound, memory, maybe even fear. Tuma walked beside you, unusually silent, the beam of his flashlight cutting across the seamless surface ahead. But it didn't reveal much. The walls seemed to swallow light the same way they swallowed your thoughts, gently but without permission. You whispered, "What is this place?" Tuma paused, then said, "I don't think it's part of Earth anymore." And somehow you agreed. It didn't feel like a place buried. Felt like a place grown. Like you were inside something ancient and evolving. Then the path curved, and the air shifted. A new chamber opened, vast and circular, domed like the inside of a seashell. At its center, a massive spire of black glass rose from the floor, wrapped in glistening tendrils of silver. Around it, 15 chairs made of carved bone and stone. A council, maybe, or a waiting room. Either way, it wasn't empty. Figures sat in 5 of the chairs. Still, not sleeping, not dead, resting, wrapped in robes that moved without wind. with faces half shrouded in veils of ice crystals that glittered like frost on window panes. Not quite human, but not anything else you could name either. Tuma grabbed your sleeve, voice cracking. There, in stasis. You nodded, trying to calm the tremor in your chest. Or watching. The nearest figure had its hand extended toward the spire, palm open. On its skin, the same spiral was etched, this time glowing faintly, like it pulsed in time with your own breath. You stepped closer to the spire, and felt it. A hum. Not in your ears, but in your chest cavity, your ribs, your teeth. A vibration like old music playing from inside a mountain. You remembered something Nuviak had once told you when you were a child. Something about the oldest songs being the ones we don't sing out loud, just feel under our skin. This was one of those. You pressed your hand to the spire. The room changed, not violently, subtly, like the transition between sleep and dreaming. Suddenly, you were standing in another version of the chamber. Same shape, same chairs, but now they were full. 15 robed figures, all awake, all watching you. Tuma was gone. You were alone in the echo. One of them rose.
No footsteps.
Just presence. It extended a hand toward your chest. Not touching, just hovering inches from your sternum. And you felt it again. That loosening. The knot behind your ribs undone. You gasped, but not from fear. From remembering. Because this wasn't your first visit. This was your return. Here's your odd fact for the evening. In 1962, a Russian scientist claimed to have found a cave in the Ural Mountains that seemed to echo not sound, but thought. He wrote of hearing his own memories out loud. No one ever found that cave again. Some think it never existed. Some think he never left it. The robed figure lowered its hand. The others all bowed their heads at once. And just like that, the room returned. You stood once more beside the spire. Tuma still next to you, staring in disbelief. You went somewhere, he said. Didn't you? You nodded. I think. I spoke to them. What did they say? You turned to him. They didn't say anything. They remembered. Tuma exhaled. This place. It's not just a ruin. It's a living record. You glanced at the seated figures. Maybe we're part of it now. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the dome. A low, deep pulse, like a heartbeat underwater. And one of the empty chairs lit up. You looked at Tuma. He looked at you. Nope, he said, backing up. That's for you. You moved slowly, like a dreamer inside their own lucid dream. Sat in the chair. The moment you did, the spire pulsed again. And the dome above shifted from darkness to stars. Not Earth stars. You could tell. There were 3 moons in that sky. And a spiral at the center of a constellation that twisted slowly across the ceiling. The stars moved like thoughts. And then, a voice, not out loud, but inside, spoke a single phrase. You carry the thread now. You blinked. The dome dimmed. Tuma's hand grabbed your shoulder. Come on. We've been here too long. How long? You asked, still dazed. He checked his watch. 4 minutes. You shook your head. That's not possible. It is here. You both made your way out, back through the tunnel that had brought you, past the stone that now hummed quietly behind you. You could feel the spiral marking on your hand even though it wasn't visible. And just before the exit, Tuma stopped you. He pointed to the wall. Another carving. New, etched like fresh memory. Your silhouette, sitting in the 15th chair. Scientists still debate whether quantum entanglement can occur on a macroscopic scale, whether memory, intention, or experience can affect matter across space. But if this chamber was a memory, maybe you'd always been a part of it. You stepped out into the cave's entrance. The blizzard had stopped, and above, in the cloudy sky, a single spiral shimmered briefly, then faded.